think of what's happening right now in our lives like a nuclear bomb has gone off. Okay, not physically damaging like the Hiroshima and Nagasaki ones, but in terms of the impact and the effect that it's had on all of our lives, a nuclear bomb has gone off in the shape of the coronavirus pandemic, right? And we are all, okay, what, you know, totally, we just didn't know. There's enough being said on that. Okay, that's the nuclear bomb. That's definitely the health crisis, the immediate impact that we're all dealing with in our own way right now. Nuclear bombs have fallout. And after the initial blast, you then have to deal with the fallout from the blast that comes later, comes after the initial explosion. Um, I think everybody knows, but doesn't want to think about, or is trying not to think about, but is now going to have to start thinking about the economic fallout of this. Now, economics is a dark science. We all know that. It's impenetrable, it's full of a lot of jargon. There's lots of people have lots of theories about it. It's a real wall of mystery around something that otherwise infects every single one of our lives, which is money. Dominates and dictates most of our lives. I understand that money isn't the same thing that most other people understand it is, because I work in the engineering room and just have to sort of understand how money actually works, which is very different to what we understand as currency. Don't want to spend too much time because it's a long set of rabbit holes. There's an excellent series of videos called The Hidden Secrets of Money by a guy I think called Michael Maloney, and he lays it all out. There's another one, another set of videos by Niall Ferguson, who's a highly respected Harvard professor. He did a series on the BBC called The Ascent of Money. For the point of this video, it's just worth saying that money isn't what we think it is. Money isn't what we were led to believe it is. It doesn't work the way that we think it all works. And most importantly of all, you don't have to work to get money. We have all been educated and conditioned and informed that you need to work in order to get currency in the form of money. And I don't want to get too jargony on this because there's a lot of material out there muddying the water about just exactly what the terminology means. Suffice it to say that what we understand in terms of the hard cash in our wallets and the digits on our screen is not really the classical definition of money. That's a form of currency that people use to exchange value between them. That's about as jargony as I want to go. There's an awful lot of material out there. I am available for children's parties if anybody wants further information on that one. What's happened with that? Let's call that function of money a necessary component of how we live our lives. We all know that it's subject to a number of cyclical booms and busts. Sometimes the going can be great, other times it's a bit bleak. And we know that the last very significant financial crash that affected all of our lives was in 2008, when, as far as most of us understand, something happened in the financial sector, which resulted in all of us having to deal with reduced public services for some time. That was a crisis in the money system. That was a crisis with money. There was also crises in the currencies, but it was a crisis with the money system. It's important to try to sort of visualize money not as the things that you're allowed to collect and that you get paid for, but rather as a function of the economy as a whole. I like the idea of oil in an engine, but again, don't want to go too far down that, spent enough time on it. There's an area around money that we should all explore. If you've got time on your hands, if nobody's doing anything for the next 90 days and you've got access to an internet connection, look at some of the research around money. As I say, starting with Niall Ferguson and Mike Maloney are good places to start. See what cleaves closest to your understanding. Money doesn't work the way that we think it works. In 2008, when the banks messed up the money system, they were permitted by our governments to print as much money as they wanted to print, as much money as they needed to print. That's as much as I want to say about it, because there's all sorts of terminology and why it wasn't technically legally a crime. But for all intents and purposes, as far as most of us would understand it, from 2008, as a result of the crash and there being no alternative, banks were allowed to print as much money as they needed to do whatever it is they needed. They did. That was the last sort of thing that society could do for the bankers, really, was to give them control of the printing presses. Okay, if it's money you want, here, take it. This is how we print it, not currency. Subsequently, that meant if you mess it up this time, there's no second chance. If you do it again, there's nothing else we can do. That's the end of it. That's the piggy bank. The bankers promised not to. So when coronavirus hit, it was something completely unexpected, completely unplanned. Nobody saw it coming, literally. It wasn't in any policymaker's playbook that an event like this could take place. Consequently, nobody really knows right now what it is we're supposed to be doing. We're all dealing with the healthcare crisis, and that's exactly what we should be doing. It's the only thing we could be doing, and it's absolutely the right thing to keep us focused on, all of us. Because that's a priority. That's the number one priority. Let's stay focused on that. We know what we need to do. Let's stay with that. But there is the fallout, and we know the fallout is coming. But unlike its real equivalent, we can control the fallout. We can control when the fallout arrives, because it's just conceptual. It's all about the choices that we make about how we cooperate with each other. Now, what's the government done as a response? So I talk about the UK government, but this isn't really very different anywhere else in the world. Some places were already like it, other places are catching up to it lately. But the governments have pulled out all the stops to protect people's lives, which means they're no longer prioritizing people's livelihoods over their lives. It's been the economy stupid for so long. It's just we've taken that for granted. Oh, it's money, it's money, it's money. Money is the most important thing. Whatever else we're doing, the pursuit of money takes precedence over everything. It pervades everything, it does everything. You know the deal, we live with it every day. But then all of a sudden, as a result of the virus coming into town, suddenly everything stopped. And that was what was unprecedented. Nobody foresaw that. If you want to know what's happened, if everybody wants to know what's happened, the machine stopped. It just stopped, and nobody thought it could stop. Nobody thought it could be stopped. Now, I hasten to add that services that should never have been a part of that machine continue to operate. And that's the services that are related to saving people's lives. Should never have been part of a market economy, but they got wrapped up in it. Those continue to run by people who, for all they've been getting paid, might as well have been volunteers. Let's hope society recognises where the true value comes from after all this. That continues to run. Everything else has stopped. And people just cannot get their heads around it. Just can't understand how, why it stopped, what it stopped. Nobody said this could happen. Right, that's what's happened. So what happens now? While we all sit at home on this Easter weekend, wherever we are, what do we do now? What's this period ahead of us? It's kind of going to start creeping in, I think, that something fundamental has changed, has really shifted, and really there is no going back. I think as we've dealt with the initial shock after Easter, as we've dealt with the initial shock after the equinox in the run-up to Easter, we've all been going, okay, no, somehow, some way, this will get back to normal. Everything's going to be fine. But now we're realizing, no, something fundamental has changed, and that's why I'm making this video. That's why we're all communicating in this way. So we can look now, what's the government done in response? We just look at the UK government. What's the UK government done? Well, first off, the UK government needed everybody to stay at home. Come what may, just stay at home. Unless you absolutely have to be out there, stay at home. And of course, a lot of people's responses were, well, if I have to stay at home for that period, what happens to my household finances? And long story short, The government has said, don't worry about your finances for 90 days. Give or take 90 days. Started with perhaps the mortgage holiday relief, and then ended with the letter from Boris Johnson just before he went into hospital saying, don't worry, this government will make sure that you can put food on the table and make ends meet. So that's the sort of process, and it's roughly a sort of 90 days. Don't need to get too bogged down on the details. The government said 90 days, don't worry about your bills, don't worry about anything, we'll take care of everything you need. Okay, this is highly unusual. Why are they doing that? What's the reason behind that? Hang on, no, I don't get it. No, not everybody qualifies. Somebody's left out. There's a gap over here. There's a gap over there. This safety net, where are all the holes? Well, actually, unusually, totally unexpectedly and possibly unprecedentedly, the government is doing the right thing because it's the only thing it can do to save as many lives as it needs to. At the end of all of this, its effectiveness of government performance will be measured in how many lives were lost that could have been avoided had preparations been different and responses been different. So right now it's operation, let's just please save as many people's lives as we can, whatever it takes. And the Prime Minister wrote to everybody and said that's what he's going to do. So let's support him in doing that. That sounds highly unusual, supporting. Yeah, it's all a bit unusual right now. Right now, everybody's being told they can stay at home, not have to worry about paying their rent or their mortgage, their dwelling rights are assured, not really have to worry about any debt or credit they've got. Everybody should be receiving letters at some point from their credit companies saying you can request a payment holiday for the next 90 days. And food parcels are available for anybody who requests it if they're in need, if they can't get out and do it. So we have a social safety foundation in place, but it's not a very good one. And under the weight of the coronavirus, we're being asked by government, honestly, please don't do anything to diminish the capacity of that fragile network any further by overloading it. Please do whatever you can to just keep safe, keep off the streets, and let them do what they need to do. That's unusual for us, rail against it, but that's what we've got to do if we don't want that to be overwhelmed. But now we start to look at the economic fallout in the long term. What happens in the fall when the fallout hits? What happens when we don't have jobs to go back to? What happens in 90 days when the government turns around and says, right, that was fun, that was exciting, everybody back to work?